Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the METUS Tech Show. Today we're going to be talking about the people behind the microphone. So us, basically. But first, the METUS Minute. Bryn?
Thanks, Paul. Today's METUS Minute is about metering devices. Metering devices are responsible for creating a pressure change in the refrigerant circuit. In most cases, the metering device takes a high-pressure liquid refrigerant, creates a drop in the pressure, creating a low-pressure, low-temperature vapor. In Mitsubishi equipment, we use LEVs, or linear expansion valves, as our metering device. LEVs are an electronic metering device that creates a magnetic field to create the rotational force necessary to open or close the metering device. The LEVs are 12-volt DC powered and pulse 12 volts to the power leg of each coil in a specific sequence in order to drive the LEV open or closed. Upon startup, LEVs will pulse entirely closed and then open to the starting position. The LEVs will then meter refrigerant in order to maintain targets during operation. In order to test the LEV, you will need the unit-specific service manual to locate the power and common wires and check for resistance between each winding. The manual will stipulate what an acceptable level of resistance is for that particular LEV. Thank you, and let's start the show.
The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
I like how you guys bounce back and forth between heat pump talk and food talk.
The METUS Tech Show.
Mitsubishi.
So have you been having breakfast?
Yeah, it's been the same selection 2 days in a row. I don't know. I'm a little weirded out by the egg whites.
Yeah, so they have scrambled egg whites, which I think are totally useless. And they get the regular scrambled eggs, which, some people are complaining they're underdone, but that's actually the way scrambled eggs are supposed to be, the original recipe. But the thing I like about it, well, first of all, we're at the National Sales Meeting in St. Louis, which means that every hour and a half there's food brought out.
Right.
And the breakfast, the eggs were okay, they just lacked flavor, but the best thing was the bacon. The bacon was so crispy that when you bite into it, it actually falls into pieces. Sort of like a horsehair ceiling when you put a Sawzall to it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, it just falls apart just like that.
Yeah.
But it's been good. They haven't brought out gooey butter cake yet, but last night we had an event, and this is a testament to the people we work with. So Russ Gallus is on the sales side here in this area, and I think he's from this area. Yeah. And it's not like it's a guy we see in the office every day and we're close with him. This is somebody I maybe see once a year. We email and talk on the phone once in a while, but he's just such a nice guy. He brought us that pork steak, which was delicious. It was so tender.
I was shocked. I was not expecting to like that because I'm not a huge fan of like pork chops. So
What?
But those things, that pork steak was so good.
Right, it was.
Well, let's
So
back up
good.
a second because we showed up at this event that had food. They were going to have food catered for us.
Yeah.
And I walk over and I see somebody with a brown paper bag on the floor, and he was looking for you, Paul. And I didn't know what was going on, but everybody kept pointing to this brown paper bag, and it was for us.
Yeah. So well, hold on. Let's back up a minute. So several episodes ago, we did podcasts on the places we were going to. We said we're going to St. Louis. We talked about the food, and we talked about
Gooey
this
butter
pork
cake.
steak and the gooey butter cake. And then Russ said, "I'm going to bring you some." And I thought he was going to. This is yesterday, and I thought he was going to bring us some today. But he shows up at this event with a bag. That's how nice this person is. That's how nice the people we work with. We got the best people in the industry we work with. Here's a guy we see maybe once a year. Doesn't know us that well, but he listens to us and he says, these guys they're gonna try this. It was awesome. It was a nice thing to do. And I'm not a big fan of pork chops either, because when I was a kid, my mother used to dry them out. You could put them on the bottom of your shoes and re-sole them. I kind of stay away from them. But this was so good. It was so tender. It was tasty. Now, he did bring gooey butter cake, but I had another thing I had to skip out to. I didn't get to try it, but at the event, they had gooey butter cake, which was okay.
It wasn't as good as his.
No, I bet it wasn't.
Yeah, and he did say it's hit or miss.
Yeah, it is.
But let's back up a second. No, I'm just kidding. We always say let's back up a second.
How far back do you want to go?
Yeah. So, but Russ had this pork steak wrapped up in foil and then wrapped in this like picnic basket colored cloth.
Like a cloth. Yeah.
Like he had this all planned.
Yeah.
I was so blown away.
Yeah.
Like they went through all this work. I would never do something like that. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But,
Now,
you
did
know.
he make it himself?
Yeah. Yeah, he made it himself.
Oh,
He
my
marinated
goodness.
it, cooked it. He kept it warm.
Yeah. He did.
And brought it to this event and said, "Yeah, here, you know, for you guys to try this." And I sat there and we cut it all up, and then you guys took off for something else, and he ended up cutting the meat that was closer to the bone.
I wanted to know. I wanted to know on that so bad.
Yeah, it was like it was amazing, and then I ended up having whatever food was there. Was some ribs.
Yeah.
There was some roast beef and some chicken. And then he comes by with the gooey butter cake. And I didn't realize they had gooey butter cake at the event.
Yeah.
But I tried both. And like I said, his was night and day. It was way more moist. Now, I got to try making. Now, you made.
I made it. I made a gooey butter cake when we talked about it.
Yeah.
I went home and I made it that weekend. And I pulled it out of the oven and it was okay. But let it sit overnight, and I had some the next morning, and my kids tried it the next morning. When it was cool, it was so good. I'm gonna tell you, it was better than the one we had last
So
night.
what went into that recipe? Is it like condensed milk?
No,
I'm thinking.
I don't remember. I know there was cream cheese, and I know there's the powdered sugar. You sift in there, you mix it in there. There's two different things. You mixed. I don't remember exactly the ingredients, but you mix two different things, and one goes in, and then there's the frosting and stuff. Like it's the powdered sugar, and you mix it with something. I forget what, but
Yeah.
I did look up a recipe, and I found it, and it was wicked good. I mean,
Well, that's the thing is if the one that he brought was better than what they had at the event, because the one at the event was really good.
It was good.
I was
It was
surprised. That was pretty
good.
It was
but
good.
But after having his, and I had to go get the expert, Lacey Dietz.
Yeah.
Now, if Lacey Dietz bakes, she loves to bake, and she can bake the hell out of chocolate chip cookies and lemon squares. And being in Accelerate and being in Swanee, she would bring over platters of cookies and different things. And so I said, Lacey, you got to come and try this gooey butter cake. And she says, yeah, they have a bunch over there. And I didn't realize it. And I said, but yeah, you got to try this one. And she said, yeah, that's way better.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
well,
so-
we missed out because there was a schedule of events last night, and it was our turn to go do this thing. So we had to
So he did. He went above and beyond.
He did. But that's the kind of people we work with. I mean, I've always said this since I've started here, but this is the best group of people I've ever worked with. And I worked in a family business. But this is the best group of people I've ever worked with. And he proved it last night. I mean, how many people would do that? Doesn't really know us that well, and then he goes to all this trouble, cooks this thing, and brings it in, and it's like,
And we've gotten a lot of great feedback this week being here at the National Sales Meeting from different sales people that listen to our podcast and learn a lot, especially recently with the A2L transition. They're the last to hear some of the technical information, the technical side, the application side of A2L, and they're listening to our podcast to get all that information. It's great that they love to listen to us, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because we're getting a lot of people that are saying we want to know the people behind the microphones, what who's who and whose voice is whose, and
Right.
So one more thing I want to mention: we were in St. Louis, and there was we're in Boston, and there was a contractor from St. Louis in the class, and Bryn was teaching the class, and I came in at lunchtime, and he said, "Hey, I recognize your voice." And Cole was his name. He actually sent us an email, which we'll probably get to at some future fan mail episode. But he was telling me that he's actually listened to the podcast, and he's been on a job site and needed to know something and remembered we talked about it. So he went and looked at the transcript of the podcast, and he found the information he needed. So that makes us happy, because that's the whole purpose. The number one purpose of this podcast is, first and foremost, entertainment and food.
Right.
yeah.
And then we sprinkle in some technical knowledge in there as well once in a while.
Yeah.
But it's nice to hear. And then, and the people we work with goes even beyond our employees, even our DSGs. So we were at an event, I think the three of us were in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and Brent Cox was one of our DSGs from Young Supply in Michigan. And he was there, and again, it's not a guy I see probably more than once a year. Come up, shake your hands, a hug, how you doing? Love the show. He just emailed us and told us he loves the METUS Minute thing we've added to it. So it's just, we work with some of the nicest people.
And they always ask us where to get food now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Right,
the
like
downside.
we're the experts on where to eat. Well, we're becoming experts, I guess, and the weight that we've put on shows
Yeah.
that we like to eat.
All the
You know,
evidence is right
I,
here.
I didn't get that. I'm like, it was like just a few weeks ago. I'm like, why is everyone asking me where to eat? And then it just finally, it's because of what we
We
talk
won't
about.
shut up about it.
Yeah, and of course, and you look at me, he goes, "Oh, that guy must know where to eat." So let's go follow him. You don't want to be behind me in a buffet line. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So, welcome to the METUS Tech Show.
Yeah, who is the METUS Tech Show?
Who is the METUS Tech Show?
Right? Who cares? But some people do care,
Yeah.
and we're going to take a few minutes today to kind of talk about who we are, how we got to METUS, how we started out in the HVAC trade, because a lot of people don't realize, and it really bugs me, that because we're technical instructors, that we didn't come out of a service van,
Right.
or we just kind of got into teaching. And we were teaching English classes or something before we came here. No, a lot of us, all of us, came out of a service van in one way, shape, or form. Right?
Right.
Scott Tallman, he was in the testing and balancing field, so he had his hands on HVAC equipment all his life. And
And Roland, who retired, he was in a van, had his own business for a while, had his own sheet metal shop
Yeah, it was a
for
tin
a
knocker.
while.
If you ask
Yeah.
him, it was a tin
Juan
knocker.
Cardona had his own business as
Yeah.
well, former DSG.
Yeah.
So, we come from the HVAC world, right? So, Paul, let's start with you. How did you get your start in HVAC?
Well, it was honestly by accident, I think. So right out of high school, I went in the military, and I was going to pursue a career in law enforcement. So I was in the military police, and I did that for 4 years. And I got out, and I was in the National Guard, Air National Guard for a while, which is something totally different. And I did basically SATCOM unit, to simplify it. And I kind of putzed around a little bit, to be honest with you. I didn't get into it right away. I was.
Well, wait a minute. In the Army, you trained dogs, didn't you?
Yeah, I was a canine.
German-
I was a canine MP. My partner was a dog. Every day it was like a 90-something pound shepherd mix. Sarge was his name. And still, I loved that job, and I enjoyed my time in the military. I always tell people I had more growth in those 4 years in the military than I did the previous 18 or 19 years, whatever it was, till that point. But I didn't get in the HVAC right away. So I'm the youngest of 5 boys, and my oldest brother, Manny, I think it's a 13, 14-year difference between us. And this is how dumb I am. He was in the HVAC business. He had his own business with his partner, Lowell. And I didn't even know it. I didn't know what he did. I had no clue. Because, the big gap like that, you don't, it's not like you hang out all the time. The next oldest brother is 7 years older than me. So even then, it wasn't that much. But honestly, I was sitting there one day watching TV, and I saw an ad for an HVAC school that was up in Woburn, Mass. It's no longer there. It went out of business. And I called him up, and I went there, and I signed up. And then my brother Manny found I was going to school there, and he probably, I never told him this, but he thought I did it because I knew business he was in. I had no clue. And I'm just being honest here. I had no clue what he did for work. And then I got that. My first job out of school was building cascade systems. I worked for a company manufactured from scratch. There was a guy that welded everything together, and then the sheet metal, it was painted, and my job was to do the refrigerant piping and the wiring. And I learned a lot about brazing, because everything was either brazed or silver soldered, depending on what it was. But some of these cascade systems are pretty intricate. They were amazing. I mean, and basically a cascade system is 2 refrigerant systems where one condenser is the evaporator for another system. It's just, it's basically it.
Yeah.
They used to have, salt sprays in some of these. So I know one of the customers was an auto manufacturer, and they used it to test their batteries. So that you can make extreme heat, extreme cold, sort of what our test chambers do down in Swanee. Salt sprays on them and things like that. And then after that, I had a cousin who worked for Sears, replacing appliances. And he got me a job there, and they hired me because I knew how to braze. And there was a big recall at the time on a bunch of domestic refrigerator compressors, and it was 3 million they were going to change. And they hired me because I could, because I knew how to braze.
We'll be right back. Hey, listeners.
If you like the METUS Tech Show, you should check out our YouTube channel called the METUS Training Network. That's METUS Training Network. Head on over to the METUS Training Network for tons of videos and programming made for HVAC professionals just like you. We've got technical training tips, HVAC program updates, and episodes of our new HVAC talk show called The Comfort Zone. Of course, you also get to catch up on more episodes of the METUS Tech Show as well. Head on over to YouTube and subscribe to the METUS Training Network today. Now, back to the METUS Tech Show.
And I was there for a little over a year, and I think I changed one compressor. And I was supposed to be the AC guy, AC and refrigeration guy, and they gave me microwaves, treadmills, trash compactors. And I was getting all frustrated, because the dispatchers, they just want to send a body. They really, honestly, didn't care who was there. They just, the customer's angry, let's just send a body there. And I was getting aggravated. And then there was a guy, Roger Jewell, who had been with Sears for 30 years. He changed my life. He said, listen, what's the worst that can happen if you go there and can't figure it out? Electricity is electricity. Right. Mechanics is mechanics. You've got that basic knowledge. Go figure it out. And that's what would happen. I'd go on a call. It would be a microwave oven. All right, let me see what I can figure out. It would be a treadmill. It would be a trash compactor. It would be a washer, a dryer, a range, a stove, an oven. I just figured things out and started fixing them. And I can basically fix every appliance in the house, which I think is why my wife married me. The bad side of that is I finally got rid of a dryer that was like almost 40 years old, and I got rid of it when it caught fire. So that was the only reason, because I could get the parts. But he changed my life. He says, just go there and learn. Figure it out, and if you can't figure it out, then you call somebody. It's the worst thing that's going to happen. And it was funny, it was a little over a year later, year and a half, my boss comes up to me and says, hey, congratulations. You got the best numbers, the fewest callbacks. I go, oh, yeah, thanks. I'm giving my notice. And my brother, Manny, was at this point in time, was just a solo one-man shop. He had some independent contractors, and he hired me. I was a service guy. I did installs for a while. And before this point, when I was going to HVAC school, that would be over. I think it was like half a day, and on the weekends or whatever, I'd be helping him. I was just a helper with the installers. I was doing that, and then I just did the service, and got pretty good at it. We did, let's say, 75% residential, 25% commercial. I mean, I didn't do the big chillers and things like that, but I did the big rooftop units and everything. And I got to the point where I'd been doing this a while. My son Tom was just born, and I'd got an injury. I fell off a roof and hurt my back. I didn't break anything, but I just physically couldn't do the work anymore. And I got a job teaching part-time at a local for-profit school. They put me in charge of the HVAC department, and a couple of years later, I'm running the whole school. I was a director of education. So this is me. I'm a high school graduate, veteran, went to a school, and my wife tells me, I don't remember this, but she tells me that after I was working there like a couple of months, I came home one day and go, this place is so messed up, I'm going to be running it someday. And I was just joking, and they made me the director of education because I was really running the HVAC department, doing such a good job, and they needed somebody, and they sent me to a different campus to open it up, start from scratch, and I went briefly to another company, and then I just wasn't I wasn't thrilled with it anymore, and then a recruiter called me up and said, hey, I got this job at Mitsubishi. And okay. So at the time, they only had one instructor, across the country. That was in Atlanta, and the different training centers they had. They wanted to get full-time instructors because the service guys were spread thin. They were doing all the the site visits and all this and the classes. So I was hired in Boston, and then here, as we grew, I was the second instructor. The first instructor, he ended up graduating from college, was going to school at night, so now he's one of our engineers.
James Brackett.
Yeah, James Brackett. He's one of our engineers.
Wow.
Great guy. He was down in Swanee, and then so everybody else has been on since, and so we got 8 instructors.
Yeah. So how many training centers when you started?
We had Atlanta, which was in a different location. and we had Boston, and we had Hebron, Cincinnati, Hebron, Kentucky, and we had Houston. And then we moved Swanee to the building we're in now. And this is not going to be in order. We opened up Orlando, we opened up Dallas, we opened up Chicago. Oh, we did have Irvine, and then we moved Irvine to Cyprus.
Yeah.
For a short time, we had one in Philadelphia, just temporary. Then we opened up New York City. Did I miss one?
No.
Well, then we got New Jersey, obviously Florence, the warehouse there. There's a training center there. So yeah, that was a growth. This will be in September. I'll be here 14 years.
Wow.
Nice. So working for your brother, did he play favorites with you?
No, it was just another guy. And he grew his company. Went
Did
from
you hear him? He said he broke his back on the job. I don't think he was getting favorites.
Yeah, no. It was he had the right attitude. Because here we are, we're the team, right? But he had the right attitude. He goes, training is important. Let's end with training. And there's that story, and I don't know where it came from, if it's a story or if it's just a parable of some kind. But somebody said, I don't want to pay for my guys to go to training and then have them leave. And he goes, well, would you rather not train them and have them stay?
Right.
So that was his attitude. It's training. Phil Valpe is one of our DSGs. I think he's close to retirement, I think in the next year or two. But I was a young tech sitting in his classes. And and it comes full circle. I got to meet him, work with him here again. So yeah, HVAC's a small world.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
It'll surprise you how small it is sometimes.
It is. I was one of the first classes I did in California. There was a guy sitting there who used to work with Michelle, our admin up in Boston, at a company in Framingham. So it's a small world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, most of the time you're hearing episodes with Paul, myself, Steve, and Bryn, and it's because we're all out of the Boston office.
Right.
And we got access to the podcast kit. Not that we don't have other podcast places where we can, broadcast, but we will remote people in.
Yeah. There's two reasons why it's mostly us. One is what you just said, is we're all together in the same office when we're not traveling. And the other reason is this is not what we do full time.
No.
We all have many other duties to do full time. So a lot of times, because somebody asked me here, he goes, oh, how far ahead do you plan these podcasts? I go, last minute.
Yeah. Sometimes
it's
the day before.
Not even. And sometimes it's like, hey, let's do a podcast. Let's come up with a topic.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, to our listeners up there, we would love suggestions on topics that you want to hear.
Yeah.
Because we're always struggling, hey, what are we going to talk about next?
Right.
Yeah. And that's basically it. Sometimes, hey, Bryn, you got time to do a podcast? Let's do it. We'll do it tomorrow. What are we going to do? Well, we'll figure it out.
Right.
So it's not what we do full time. And originally, the idea started as a joke. It was Juan and Roland, and that was, I think, the vision we had back then would be Juan and Roland show, and then because of commitments and scheduling and everything they had, we had to get another episode out, and it was like, well, come on, Steve, let's go, it's the way it happened. So when we have opportunities like this, and I'm just going to be frank with people. We're at the national sales meeting, and we were hoping that we could come out here with a dozen episodes and just put them in the bank, and the chamber, whatever you want to call it, and let them go. But this is our second one we're recording. We've been here 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we have other obligations, but yeah.
About you?
Yeah.
About me?
Yeah.
How'd you start?
So I started in the HVAC trade basically, I think because my cousin Joe was doing it already. He had graduated from vocational school. He had a great job coming out of high school, and I kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps. And I've always been kind of techie. I've always tried to be a problem solver, trying to fix things. I love the gratification of fixing something and seeing it work. So went to vocational school, and I went through an exploratory program which consisted of refrigeration. It wasn't even HVAC at the time. It was just refrigeration, appliance refrigeration, and like commercial refrigeration. Yep. And you had a choice between that, plumbing, and steam engineering. And I didn't want to be a plumber. I didn't want steam engineering. It looked like a real nasty, dirty job needed. But it was, I wanted to get into I wanted to see the electrical side. And that was great about refrigeration. You not only learn refrigeration, but you learn electrical. and controls and everything else, and had all this. I was really interested in that, and I picked that, and I got it. And there was 20 of us in that class, and only 2 of us left and actually stuck with this trade.
Wow.
Which is amazing. Everybody else is welders, carpenters, just went and took a different path. So I got out of high school and I jumped onto fishing boats. I did refrigeration on fishing boats. So ice makers, walk-in coolers on fishing boats was a really nasty job in some of these fishing boats. And I did that for a couple of years. And from there, I went to a company in Wareham, Massachusetts. And I spent 3 years putting together duckboard. I always talk about this because duckboard is just like
Awful. Should be outlawed.
Yeah. So crawling across attics with a kitchen knife and a roll of tape and a stapler, and putting together this duckboard, which I couldn't believe that they were actually using this stuff, in a home and blowing air through it.
Yeah.
Which is all fibers, and it just I would go home itchy every night, and I got sick of the install side of things. Not sick of it. I was really interested in the service side and getting to a service van, and I had to prove myself, like all of us did, right? Can I actually go and troubleshoot something and be efficient at it? And I had my multimeter and spent 20 years in a service van on rooftop units, on different things, and I got into the medical side of HVAC, which was Rhode Island Hospital. And I spent 10 years at Rhode Island Hospital, got my Rhode Island refrigeration license, and I worked on chillers, big 2,500-ton chillers, all the way down to small fractional horsepower stuff, medical refrigeration, minus 80 freezers, minus 80 Celsius. Everything was at to figure out how to convert everything from Celsius to Fahrenheit, because in the medical world, everything's in Celsius. But we're working on freezers that hold human tissue and bones, and these systems cannot go down. They take blends of refrigerants, different refrigerants to charge these systems. It was real intricate. Working on ice machines all that time. And I had worked on ice machines at restaurants before. Now, if you worked on ice machines before, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. It takes a long time. You have to sit there, watch the ice make a harvest. It takes time. Customers don't want to pay for that time for you to sit there and watch it make ice.
Yeah.
But it's part of that job. And ice machines are very finicky. But it was a lot of maintenance on ice machines, and just seeing all of the different systems in HVAC and refrigeration. And while I was there, I got a phone call out of the blue one day from a technical school. I don't know how they got my number. Probably from a job search or something. I had my resume somewhere. And they said, yeah, I'd like you to come in for an interview for a teaching position. And I said, you got the wrong guy, because I don't talk in front of people. Public speaking is one of the biggest fears. It haunted me all my life in school and everything else. And they said, no, come in, talk to me. At least just come and sit and talk with us. And I did that. And my wife was like, go for it. What do you got to lose? Maybe it will open doors to something else. And they said, yeah, we'll pay you $35 an hour. It's 4 hours a night, and you teach HVAC. I said, well, how bad can this be? And I watched some instructors there teach, and I got my first class and started teaching. And long story short, if you're talking about something you're passionate about, all that fear disappears, and you're just kind of like, this is, I'm in the pocket, I'm in my realm, so I can do this. And then, funny story, I look on my phone and this job comes up, Mitsubishi Technical Instructor in Southborough, Massachusetts. Wow, this is interesting, Mitsubishi Electric. And I pressed apply now and went back to what I was doing, and literally 5 minutes later, Paul Shaves calls me up, and he says, hey, are you Portuguese? Yeah, my last name's Pimentel. Yes, I am Portuguese. You're pretty much hired. So, yeah, and the rest is history. I came in for some interviews, and they ran me through the gauntlet. Paul said, you're going to have to get up and do a presentation for us, like a 15-minute presentation on something, technical topic of your choice. Bryn, you had to do the same thing. And there were people remoted in to watch this. And I chose absorption chillers, because that was something that I worked on. It was something unique at the hospital where it's lithium bromide is basically the refrigerant. Water is the refrigerant. Lithium bromide brings that water through the system, and then you use steam to move that lithium bromide. And I remember, Paul, you were sitting there with Joe Armenti, and both of you guys were like, that was, pretty slick. You did a presentation on something that none of us know anything about, so we don't know if you were lying or what.
You could have made it all up.
Yeah, but yeah, and the rest is history. I've been with METUS for 8 years, and it's been been one hell of a ride.
Yeah.
Bryn.
Well, hold on a minute before you do that. Just getting back to how small HVAC is. Yeah. At the hospital, Roland was there, and I knew Roland from when I worked at my school, and then he
Not
worked
at the hospital. MTTI.
I'm sorry, MTTI.
Yes.
At the school, right? And at the hospital, you work with my cousin Joe Braga, who's in HVAC, who also worked at the hospital. Yep. So it's like it really it amazes me sometimes the people you know.
It is, and that's why I feel like I've known Roland Wager all my life. He's just one of those guys. When you meet him, you feel like you've known him all your life. But when I was at MTTI, he was a god. Roland was the one that built that HVAC program from the ground up. I'm talking all of the refrigeration simulators, all the systems. He put together a lot of the curriculum, and he worked with you, Paul.
Yeah, he worked with me. That's how I met him. We worked for the same company at different campuses. Yeah. And then both of us, I became a DOE of one campus. He became a DOE of another campus. And we got to work very closely together. In fact, there was one time when I'm talking to a former student of mine, and he's talking to a former student of his, and me and Roland are in the same office, and the students we're talking to are in the truck together, and they were arguing about which one of us was the better instructor. I will give it to Roland because Roland has this amazing energy.
So all I heard at the school was Roland, and there were pictures of him all over the place with all his graduating classes. And him building some of the stuff in the rooms, and then fast forward 4 or 5 years later, and hey, Roland Wager? That guy's like the god over at MTTI, and we're going to hire him for the Orlando position.
Yeah,
like, what?
It was a no-brainer. He was moving to Florida, and we had a position open. I called him up. I said, Roland. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm looking for a job in Orlando. I goes, have I got a deal for you? Yeah. He's a great guy, great instructor, wicked smart.
So that voice you hear at the beginning of our intro, a podcast for HVAC professionals by HVAC. That's Roland, and we miss him to death because he's retired now. Yeah. And he was just a comedian.
Endless laughs.
He's the reason that this podcast started, because him and Juan, when you put those two guys together, it's frickin' frack. It's the comedy duo. And our old director said, and I made a joke saying, you guys should have your own podcast. And our director said, you know what? Make it happen. Yeah. And I was like, we don't know the first thing about doing a podcast. Yeah. But we bought a podcast kit, and the rest is history. But yeah.
Yeah. So, Bryn, what about you?
So mine's not as prestigious. Oh,
you're the young puppy, young pup,
young bull.
So when I got out of high school, I went to college for a single semester, and I went through that entire semester having not paid them anything. And I was getting ready to register for the next semester, and they were like, "Hey, do you plan on paying your tuition?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." Tried to get loans, didn't work. So I ended up dropping out and owed the school directly money. So I spent the next couple of years working gig jobs, waiter, working at retail, things like that, to pay that off. And when I was 20, I decided that I wanted to go into law enforcement. Law enforcement's in my family. So I straightened up and spent a year kind of preparing, because you had to be 21 to get into the academy. And then at 21, I went to the academy. I started working in law enforcement. I did that for about 5 years. And about 3 years into doing law enforcement, I had a family friend who did HVAC. He actually had his own business. Now, he really only worked on oil and a little bit of gas. But to make some extra money, I asked him, hey, do you mind if I follow you around and go on some calls with you just so I can kind of see what it's like? I mean, I grew up after high school, like I never had any money. So when my car would break down, I would be like a YouTube mechanic. And that's kind of how I got an aptitude towards wanting to work on things with my hands and fixing things. And so when he, let me start doing that, I fell in love, like working on oil systems and trying to figure out how they work and what's going on with them. That's kind of how the interest was sparked. And I was starting to reach a point with the law enforcement where I knew I wanted to move on. And when you do that as pretty much your only career, it's tough to get out of because you're pigeonholed. You try to apply for an HVAC job, and the only thing that's on your resume is police officer. There's not really a whole lot there for them to grab onto.
Yeah.
So I kind of took a leap of faith. I quit. I did landscaping for a couple months. And by pure luck, when we got laid off for the winter, there was an HVAC program. It was specifically for oil at the time, but there was a program that they were running for the 12 weeks during my layoff to get you your NORA certification. And so, like on a whim, I signed up for it, went through the oil school, and in the spring following, I started applying once I had that certificate. And I started working for a company up in Brattleboro, Vermont called Dead River. They're actually a pretty big company up in the Maine area, and they go down through New Hampshire, Vermont, and they're getting into Massachusetts now. But they were only oil and gas. They didn't do any AC. So I spent a couple years there. I got, really confident working on oil. That's what I fell in love with.
Oil is an art, man. It's not, there ain't a
so
lot
much
of oil
to it.
people out there.
Yeah, there's so much to it. And, like this, we were on the service side. That particular company was structured where everybody did everything. So they rotated in people for installation. So I was learning about, hydronic systems. I was learning about, furnaces and installation side of things. We also did service and then your tune-ups. But because it was in Vermont, more than 50% of their homeowners are still on oil. And so the state of Vermont had a program for replacing oil tanks because they were having so many leaks on old oil tanks. So they created like a rebate program for oil tanks. And I cannot tell you how many times I have struggled with oil tanks trying to get them into the basement. It was like a 2 times a week thing for about a year and a half where we were putting in oil tanks. And by the end of it, you get so good and so used to, the tight spaces and the heavy lifting that you could do an oil tank in like 4 hours. Sometimes they'd give you 2 in a day. And you're like, you got an oil tank over here, then an oil tank over there. And so that was kind of how I got into it. But because I only did oil and gas, I was like a little bit limited. And I knew that HVAC is what I wanted to do for a living. And so I just couldn't see myself working at a company that didn't do all of it. Right. I wanted to do the air conditioning side of things, heat pumps. I knew that was, a big deal and was only going to get bigger. So I bounced around a little bit, but ended up at a company in Western Mass called Sandry Energy. And I got really lucky. I started there, and within 2 months of working there, the department manager, his name's Joel Tognorelli, he's an awesome guy. He pulled me into his office, and I was panicking, right? You've only been there 2 months. I was like, oh, no, this is not good. And he said, it's not often that I get to pull people into my office to tell them how good they're doing. He's like, I've got customers saying how great you are. The office is really complimentary, so keep up the good work. And he goes, if you want any training in anything, let me know, and I'll get you there. So I told him, I'm like, I want it all. I want to learn gas.
That's
I want
a
to
good
learn
boss.
AC.
That's a great boss.
He pushed me. Anything I wanted to do, any training I wanted to do, he put me on it. He got me really moving on the air conditioning. He, had his own company prior to working for Sandry. So he did it all. And he was a School of Hard Knocks guy, too. He never went to college. He worked for a gas company for a long time and then opened his own business. And he was just Mr. Figure It Out. Like, there was nothing he couldn't figure out how to do. Somebody wanted a steel and concealed ducted unit in an attic that was tiny or like a crawl space. Like, he was going to figure out a way to make it fit and how to get the line set in there. There was no in his terminology. So he was just an awesome guy and really like helped boost me, up and build my confidence as an HVAC tech and also, give me the education and the learning. Yeah. And so at some point he just kind of threw me to the wolves and was like, you're the service guy. You're responsible for the crappy calls, the ones that come in that we can't figure out. You got to go and figure out. And so that trial by fire was really what just accelerated my experience and my knowledge. And in fact, he actually had sent me to HVAC training, a mini split manufacturer training. And when I was sitting in there, I noticed that the guy that was teaching the class was like my age. And I was kind of late to HVAC because I did the law enforcement thing for 5-6 years. So by the time I got in, I was already getting close to 30. And so the kid was like my age, and he was the one teaching the class. And curiosity piqued, and I went up to him after the class, and I was like, just out of curiosity, what are your qualifications to be educating? Like, how did you get here, basically? And he was like, well, I was in a van, and then I applied. And I was like, say no more. So the first thing I did, no joke, was went to mylinkdrive.com, careers, and they were hiring a technical instructor in the Southborough office. Now, Southborough at the time was an hour and a half away. And I was like, I'm going to take a shot. I'm just going to do it. I'll figure out the drive later. And so same thing, though. I applied. I think the next day I got a call from recruitment. They kind of got the process started, and I just went through with it, met with you guys, did my presentation on a System 2000 oil boiler.
I remember that. Yeah,
I remember
Talked
those.
about the plate heat exchanger for the primary secondary loop kind of thing. Because at the time you wanted to be impressed on hydronics, and I was like, well, you just wait. But yeah, and after that, honestly, I learned more probably here working for Mitsubishi and sitting in classes and going through manuals and looking at refrigerant flow diagrams like that really solidified my knowledge, and to be able to now take that and try to impart it on other people is awesome.
Paul and I were impressed how quick you qualified for classes, which is unheard of. And when we hire anybody, it doesn't matter how much you know about Mitsubishi. I mean, you have to learn the nomenclature. And when I started here, I'm like, what's a PAD? I'm never going to know all this stuff.
That's what I said.
After a while, after a couple of months, you're like, oh, this isn't that bad. But yeah, sitting in all the classes and watching instructors go up there, and it's like, I'll never be able to do what he's doing, but you end up doing it.
Yeah.
No, I say this all the time. Bryn's our rock star. We were interviewing you. We did it remotely, I think, the first time, and I told Steve, hey, let's hire this guy. Steve says, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Something like that.
Yeah. I usually can tell, and it's like when I sat down with Scott, and you sit down with somebody, and I learned a lot of this from Accelerate, but hungry, humble, smart. Those are the three qualities you're looking for someone. Not everybody has those three qualities, but you're trying to look for that. And I'm not saying smart, I'm talking people smarts.
Yeah,
social smarts. And
look, I've always said, if I can do it, anybody can, right? And when it comes to teaching, and I say this in Train the Trainer, and I think it was Ben Franklin, who I'm going to paraphrase him. He said, if you want to teach, you first must be willing to learn. And that is so true. I mean, when I started teaching, one of the things that aggravated me the most when I got out of the HVAC school and went into work in the trade, I really didn't understand fully superheat and subcooling. So when I started teaching, and I didn't fully understand the refrigerant circuit either. I graduated without, I didn't feel I knew enough. I wasn't comfortable. But when I started teaching, I said, you know what? Dang it. My students are going to know superheat and subcooling, the 6 ways to Sunday, and they're going to know the refrigerant circuit. Every single day, no matter what subject it was, I went over the refrigeration circuit and what happens to it when it leaves the compressor as a high temperature, high pressure super. I went through the whole circuit. And Jim McQuiggan, who hopefully still out in the field, he was my first student who graduated from the night class. And he was working at one of the hospitals in Boston. I don't know which ones, but they're all like across the street from each other. And he was on the maintenance staff, and they told him, when you graduate school, we'll put you on the HVAC team. And he did that. And a year later, they gave him a review, and they gave him an extra $5 an hour from what he was getting. Then he went across the street that afternoon, had an interview at the other hospital, and they asked him, what do you know about the refrigerant circuit? And he told them, well, it comes out of the compressor, high pressure, high temperature, superheat, and it went on and on to the whole thing. And the guy said, you know that better than the guys that have been here for 10 years. He hired him for $10 more than he just got increased to. Yeah. So that's what it is. And then, so anyway, long story to say that I thought I knew it, but then to teach it is something totally different. I was working full time, teaching, 3 nights a week or 4 nights a week, whatever it was, and I had to prepare. And the only time I could do it was on the weekends. I'd lock myself in a room, and I'd study, and I'd practice presenting. And I've said this 100 times to people. My dog, I had a beagle, Sophie. She was in the room with me, and I'd hold the cookie so I could see her eyes. I could follow her eyes when I'm when I'm practicing my presentations. If that dog, if she was still around and she could speak English, she'd make a great tech if she had thumbs.
And for the listeners that don't teach classes, I'm going to fill you in on a little secret. As instructors, when we're teaching classes, we learn so much.
Yes,
as instructors
you do.
teaching. You have those aha moments.
Yep.
I still have them till this day, 8 years later. You'll be teaching a class and you're looking at a slide and you're teaching something, and then you're like, oh my God.
Well,
that's why LEV4 is there, or LEV
it
such and
clicks.
such. You know,
or
so
you get
it's-
that challenging question,
Yes.
right? You get the one
I
question
love
that
questions.
stumps you in class. You're like,
Yeah.
oh no.
I love questions I don't know the answer to.
I guess I didn't fully understand this. And so then you hit the books and you figure it out.
Yeah.
And then the challenge or the fun part is then you go, okay, how do I make them learn it on their own?
Yeah.
Right? I know now. I learned. So how do I get them to learn it
So
on their own?
when we were at the Diamond Contractor Conference last, what was it, November or December, whatever it was, I spoke to a contractor who said, yeah, my daughters don't like you. She thinks you guys are boring. You know, she was in the truck with me, and she goes, Dad, these guys are boring. And then she saw their picture, and they go, they look like you, right? So if you're listening and you're riding with your dad or your uncle, your cousin, whoever, and you're not in the trade, and you don't know what, you're in high school, you don't know what you're going to do yet, look at the three of us graduated high school and came out of a van, and here we are.
Yeah.
You know, the trade has changed dramatically since I started in this trade, right? There are career paths that you can take, and everything is different. I always compare this trade to the medical field, right? It's you go to you learn anatomy, and you go to medical school, and then you veer off into all these different specialties, whether it's pulmonology or cardiology or orthopedics. You're going to go to school, you're going to learn a lot of different things, and then you're probably going to specialize in something. Yeah. One of the things, getting back to when I started, so we were a trained comfort specialist dealer, and our mini split brand was Mitsubishi. So when I came to work for Mitsubishi, I was all excited. I told you, I think a couple episodes ago, I said my brother's company, the day I got interviewed here, they installed 17 Mitsubishi 1-to-1s as a company, and it was great. And then the JV came along, and we had train. I said, "This is it. This is where I belong." So it's a great trade. So if you're not in this trade, go learn and get into it. And that's the important thing. We're obviously with the training team, but it's not a trade where you go to school and then stop learning. You have to learn something every single day, and all the time it's ever changing. Look, we got the A2Ls, and that's the technology has changed. I mean, we went from when air conditioning systems when I started were either TXVs or the little fixed orifice piston we used to call them. Yep. And now we're the TXVs. You're not going to see that in any new system now. You're not going to see a piston. It's all.
And as instructors, we're not perfect, right? Our main goal is to help you guys in the field, the installers, the service techs, better install our equipment, better service our equipment. And we're taking manufacturer literature and we're following it to a T. Right. And we also talk about best practices, and a lot of that is coming from a background that we have in HVAC. So we're not always going to get it right. And when I start my classes, I don't like talking about my background. Right. And kind of being one of those guys that's, I've been in this for 30 years, and I'm going to bust out my wallet and say, I got licenses in Connecticut and Massachusetts. I don't like to do any of that. I tell the students right off the bat, listen, I learn so much from the class in front of me, from all the students coming to class, because they keep me up to date on all the new technology, because I've been out of the field. Yeah. Right? When I worked on a boiler 20 years ago, it didn't have inverter circulator pumps on it. It didn't have all the new technology that some of these boilers have. 90%. And we worked on 90% furnaces back in the day, but they've come along.
Way different now.
Yeah. So much has changed in the field, and I learned so much from them coming to class. So we don't always get it right, but we're striving. We try all the time to put out the right information on our equipment, on Mitsubishi electric heat pumps. And all of that comes from the manuals, basically. Yeah.
The other thing I'll say, too, is just for those who sometimes feel like they might be trapped, right, or stuck either in a field or even stuck in the HVAC industry, you always have to advocate for yourself, and you always have to believe in yourself. You can take some wild chances. You took a wild chance.
Yeah.
You got recruited, so you're special. But Steve, myself, we took a wild chance. We took a shot on something, just going like, we'll see what happens. We believed in ourselves just enough to get to that step, and it changed how our futures turned out.
Yeah,
so
it opened doors. And
don't be afraid to take that chance, because you never know.
Oh, by the way, that recruiter who called me, he called me because I called Chris Morin, who used to work for us, but he worked for one of these agencies that did the rebates for the state of Massachusetts. And I called him. I said, hey, you guys hiring? I'd like to move on. And he says, no, but I was talking to this recruiter, and it was like 10 minutes later, this recruiter calls me. Hey, and it took a while. From the time the recruiter called me to the day I started working was 4 months.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm here. Like I said, this is the best group of people I've ever worked with, except for you guys.
But if you would have asked me 10 years ago, or told me 10 years ago that I'd be teaching somewhere, I would have told you you're out of your mind.
Crazy.
You're
You're
crazy because
crazy.
I'm going to
100%.
retire. I'm going to probably die in a chair at Rhode Island Hospital as a service tech. It's just
when I graduated high school, honestly, I didn't think I was mechanically inclined. I didn't know the difference between a Phillips screwdriver and channel lock pliers. I really didn't. I wasn't. My father wasn't the kind of guy that did a lot of construction. I had a brother who did fix his own cars, and everything. But I really didn't think I was that mechanically inclined. And then I went to school and I started doing it. I could figure things out, And I remember getting out of school and going to work. And then one day I didn't have to ask anybody anything. I didn't have to look anything up. I just got it. It's, hey, so if I can do this, anybody can. So if you know somebody who wants a good trade, this is a great trade. And I'm not going to knock the other trades, but in this trade, you learn a lot about electricity. You learn a lot about plumbing. You picked up some carpentry. I can tell you right now, I can pipe my own house. If I had to do all the plumbing, I rewired my whole entire house when I bought it.
Yep.
I built a deck because of the things I picked up in this trade. I can fix every appliance in the house. So it's
at the very
a great
least,
trade.
it gives you the confidence to try.
Yeah.
And
now it's easier because now when I started, I remember my little niece when I was little. She goes, "Well, look it up on YouTube," and I go, "What?" So, an HVAC guy, how do you write YouTube? The letter U, tube. She goes, no, it's YOU YouTube. I go, so, now you have that now. You can look things up if you're not sure. So,
yeah. So you guys, the listeners, you know a little bit more about who's behind the microphone here. I want to close with hobbies. Bryn, what do you do besides HVAC, besides work?
Not a whole lot. I work out a lot. That's kind of like my passion outside of work. Visit family, travel, beaches, enjoy the weather. I used to be big into golf, but you do it for like 3 years and you don't get any better. You just all right, it's not for me.
that was me.
Yeah,
Almost everything.
Chasing
like
a ball
that.
in 90-degree heat.
Yeah.
And you, Steve, you like fishing?
So bass fishing, music, and cooking. So I've been in bands all my life,
cooking.
and I recently had to kind of retire from it because it was too much with this job. But that's a huge passion of mine. Bass fishing, getting out of my boat, freshwater fishing, just catch and release.
Yeah, Steve was worried about getting too famous in his band.
Oh,
they were getting some pretty serious gigs, and it was getting to the point where he was having a hard time managing, Mitsubishi Electric and the fan.
Yeah,
you can look him up on YouTube. You can find his band on YouTube.
I was,
huge events. So
approaching 50, living the life of a 30-year-old. So, it got too much for me. But, Paul, what do you...
I don't have hobbies. I really don't. People keep asking me
but you have
that.
chickens. You
I
like
have
to cook.
chickens. I do like to cook, but I don't consider that a hobby. It's just I got to
Survival.
feed the family. Yeah, I mean, my wife, she listens to this sometimes. So I got to watch what I say here. She's a good cook. She's better than she gives herself credit for. But I used to do a lot more cooking than I do now because now I'm traveling and she's cooking up stuff. She sent me pictures. It looks amazing. But I love to cook. And our deal when we first got married is I'll do the cooking, you do the dishes. And it was like she regrets that deal that we made. But I that's about it. But I don't have any hobbies. I mean. I used to scuba dive when I was younger, but then I had some ear problems. I couldn't do that anymore. And I used to go to the gun range every so often. Especially when I first got out of the military, I had a lot of guns. Now I'm down to 2.
Yeah.
I had we got a can't talk to everybody about that, So
And we all
I
have,
really don't.
We all have kids, and
Yeah,
that's
family.
probably the best thing, right?
Yeah. And I'm
watching your kids grow up is
I'm probably within 5 years of retiring, hopefully, if I can afford it, But it's going to be a struggle for me and my wife to figure out how to do something, because she says I like sitting on the couch.
Paul, if you retire,
Yeah.
you will be in the office
Oh yeah.
on
it will.
Friday when
I
everyone's
told
working
him,
from
I
home.
says, he's never going to retire. It's going to be,
He'll be checking in on us. He'll
How you guys
sit in
doing?
on classes.
Yeah, can I sit
He'll
in on
make
the
sure.
class?
yeah, he's
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
putting together some metrics on a spreadsheet somewhere.
He's going to have his
78.
own IACT forms
So,
that he makes up. And he's going to qualify us on his
I
own.
work with a bunch of
retired.
guys just like you. When I retire, and then they're like 78 working at the hospital, they're still
that'll be
turning
me.
valves and yeah.
So anyway, if you hear a bunch of voices behind us, that means there's a break. Everybody's coming out, which means there's food
Yep, it's
out
time.
on the
All right,
table.
it's time
so
to go.
it's time for us to say goodbye. I just want to say, hopefully, our listeners know a little bit more about us. Hopefully, we weren't boring, but please, if there's an episode you want to hear, let us know. If it's possible for us to do, if we have the brain power to put it together, we will.
Yeah. And when we get the other guys on, we'll have them kind of give us their background too. When Juan comes on next or
Yeah.
Scott, we'll have them give their background.
So it's not just us. We have the rest of our team of awesome instructors. Remember, we're not just instructors. We came out of a service van. We were
every
out
single
there.
one
We
of us.
crawled through the trenches.
I've been to classes where guys that teach in HVAC have no experience in a truck at all. It's a big difference. So you come to our class and we know what it's like. We're going to talk about this. We're going to have Mark Kuntz, our CEO, on here. He's a CEO of an HVAC company who actually has crawled through crawl space.
Crawled through a crawl space with a box of Flex.
Yeah.
And
This is
that
all of us. For most of us, this
Yeah.
is,
It's just amazing that he had that experience.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
he,
for
Anyway.
most of us, this is the first job we've had where our hands aren't dirty at the end of the day.
Yeah. Like Brian Surratt's one of our DSGs, and every time he shakes my hands, he goes, "Your hands are so soft." I go, "Yeah, that's because I don't work."
Finally.
You remember going home with green hands?
Yeah.
Green,
Green
black.
hands, dark,
black.
I
hands,
used to have
yeah.
just a shirt that was covered in black
Oh,
oil sludge
yeah.
and
Yep. The
Smelled
insulation,
like
all itchy
diesel.
arms and everything. Got to take cold showers so it doesn't open up your pores and get all that fiberglass in there.
you have the
I
one
remember-
plug boiler. and
I
you
remember
come home
going to
like
an
a
interview with compressor oil on my shirt.
raccoon. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the guys are looking at me like, this guy's pretty much hired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goes up to an interview with
I think
oil.
he does it.
Yeah.
I am sorry, I didn't have time to change.
Yep. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Take care.